Tuesday, the 24th of December. You know what that means, of course. Santa gets his, what might be reported as a UFO out and makes a tour of the planet, and in a matter of 24 hours is able to deliver all the gifts to all the good children, plus some charcoal to the bad children. Maybe he has an associate that does that. Well, I have already received my gift. This is a 6-inch Quattro sky watcher, parabolic, with about, I think about 30% obstruction in the front, which loses about 18% of the light, but obviates the problem of an SCT having a f2 mount right in the front of the lens. We're operating at f4. I've got a field flattener in there because it's operating at such a fast focal ratio. This scope should give about 2/3 of the same field as we saw through the 80mm Skywatcher, which operates at about 400 millimeters. So we're operating at 600. I call the scope El Quattro, and tonight I hope to get first light through it, which means, of course, if I do manage to post up a video, you will be hearing first light by Freddie Hubbard as part of the music. Anyway, this pretty much completes everything. I got another battery with it that'll provide power, so if I go astro camping, all the power needed by every aspect of the scope will be available. Of course, I can also use the battery that I received originally with the EQ6R Pro mount from my son. Thank you, Christopher. And I can also use, but it only sources power for just the mount at this point. So there's our look at the complete setup. I had to spend some time balancing everything out on both axes. I had to add an additional counterweight, although I had to shorten the counterweight shaft considerably, somewhat over the ST80, which only had a single weight on the axis. So on the right ascension axis. So there we have it. Oh, you'll also notice the stone here. I put that there because I noticed the bubble was not centering very well here on the mount, and that is now taken care of. So, despite the fact that my new battery will not be fully charged in time for this evening, I'll have to string out some AC to a power supply so that I can drive the ASI Air hub and image compiler. I should be able to get out and do some astro this evening. And of course, I found another way to protect the ZWO imager from dust in the atmosphere for the time being. All right, so I think the sun's just about set, and I think it sets at about 5:30 here at 32 degrees north, and we will be back out once again at sky dark. Oh yeah, let's have a look at the sky. Clouds off to the north, bringing roundabout. You can see the sky is kind of bright. This time until about, I would say, 35 or 40 degrees above the northern horizon. Overhead, it looks like this. We spin around, we follow the trace of the condo, and you start to see brightening once again, going down to culminating in the south. So there's our intro for Christmas Eve. And just maybe Santa Claus will fly through the field of view and we will capture on the ZWO imager in real time. Feliz Navidad. All right, it's Christmas night. The time right now is a little after 8 o'clock. I spent the evening methodically going through the mount and the scopes. I started off with the ST80, did an alignment with that, and then once I got the ST80 optically to align, I then progressed to El Quattro, the 150 ED. Once I got the opticals lined up using an eyepiece, I then dropped in the ZWO system with the ASI Air, and you're seeing the first image of the evening. This is Messier 37, an open cluster in Auriga. I'll provide more information later. Right now what I'm doing is detailing out what I need to do in order to get set up. Now, once again, we're in the backyard here. My neighbors are doing a barbecue. There's smoke in the air. It's not the greatest seeing, but here we have a fairly decent view of open cluster Messier 37 for our first view of the evening. And I'm going to tie this view in with the view I did yesterday, setting up El Quattro in the backyard to give you a little bit of an orientation. So we'll be tying these two together. So here's Messier 37. Hope you have enjoyed it. I don't think it's a very long-term exposure either. So I'll give you more details on that later. So why not just add 1 to 37 and get Messier 38? A less condensed open cluster also in Auriga. Both 37 and 38 are studies that you would have to find in the night sky. Ideally, you begin with just to push 2 telescopes, so you learn how to astro navigate manually, but eventually you get to the point where it really is nice to have a go-to system like the EQ6R Pro or the Gemini 2 Losman D mount that I have back in John Day. So these are only 1 second exposures, by the way, and we're getting some pretty decent depth. I imagine we're seeing stars. We are seeing a fairly large field, more than 1 degree field. I imagine we're imaging stars down to magnitude 13 or 14. No way of verifying that, but what I'm going to do is go on to some other studies and we'll add more detail, technical detail about them as I pull this video together. Okay, what we have now is another open cluster in Auriga. We're decrementing by 2 from 38 through 37 to 36. Messier 36, and notice when I double click on the screen it changes the zoom, and when I single click we eliminate all the controls. We get our view of the cluster. Now it'll be interesting to look up the actual apparent size of the cluster. It'll give us a very decent, give us a better sense of just how large the field is that we're getting using the ZWO system. However, I suspect it's well more than 1 degree. So we will review that tomorrow. Meanwhile, I also want to point out that the field flattener I'm using is actually f4 over 5. So it's taking the f4 system of the El Quattro f4 150 newt and probably reducing it down to like something like f3.5 or so. We'll have to just use a calculator to figure that out. Anyway, let's go ahead and pull up some NGC studies in Auriga as well. NGC 1664, I believe, is right in this region here. It almost looks like you can see it looks like the handle of the dipper with the dipper pot there. This is an NGC study, therefore it eluded Messier and Machine when they were doing their original research trying to identify comet-like cometess studies that they should avoid if they wanted to become famous by discovering comets in the, I think it was the 1700s, 1750 or so, yep, through 1790. This is still a 1 second exposure. The screen is resplendent with stars, but once again it is a fairly large field. The stars look pretty good. I did not perfect the focus. Sorry folks. I have to go bounce back and forth between the scope and this screen. One thing I will point out this evening is we're getting pretty consistent signal from the ASI Air system to be able to reveal these studies. I haven't had to play with it. One thing I did notice, however, is it's better to start the BlueStacks app player and the ASI Air program before actually hooking up the link, because it does a better job of handshaking when you do actually connect up with the ASI Air by way of Wi-Fi. So that's just something to keep in mind, especially for me in the future, because there's a lot of complexity with setting all this up and getting it to work. All right, let's go pick out another NGC study in Auriga. Well, then we're now up to even smaller, fainter cluster, NGC 1778. I assume it's right in this region here. One of the issues I have with this this mount and its interface does not allow you to synchronize to a study so that the rest of the studies will better center on the screen. So once you've done your 3-star alignment, you're pretty much stuck with that for a while, and you're going to get drift over time in terms of the position of the studies on the screen. But very fortunately, we have a very large field of view, which makes it possible to capture things that ordinarily would be lost in the Revolution 2 imaging system, which is only 15 by 20 arc minutes at 75x. Here we're probably operating about 40x. I can't be sure. I don't have the interface that I originally started out with because I had to be able to transfer everything onto the Windows 11 laptop, which required an entirely different BlueStacks app player interface that is basically being controlled by the ASI Air system. Let's push on to another NGC. NGC 1857, we've moved from the era of Messier, who was 17, I believe it was 78, to the era of the latter Herschels, which used larger scopes. I think Herschel's largest scope was equivalent to a 13-inch, modern 12 or 13-inch Newtonian, although it was speculum mirror and was larger in aperture. Now we've entered into the era where much of the NGC catalog was being captured and then compiled later by a JLE dryer. Our cluster is probably right about here on the screen, although it's hard to tell. If I had the Gemini 2 handset, it would be telling me what class cluster it was, etc., which would be very interesting information to add to a commentary. And I will at some point use this very same system with the Losman D Gemini 2 mount, so I'll be able to provide real-time information about the various studies that we turn up, because we'll also be using El Quattro, the 150 Newtonian, instead of the 150 ED, because it will give us a larger field of view. It's a shorter optical tube. It will be more wieldy in the observatory. And as I've mentioned in the previous video I posted up, I will be probably using the ED refractor on the EQ6R Pro mount for doing deep sky astronomy, lunar planetary and double stars and clusters, etc., on outside of the backyard, outside of the observatory, at remote locations which have superior seeing conditions to what we normally have seen in the NGC catalog series that I have been doing for over the last year and a half. Progressing through the years now, we're up to NGC 1893, likely located right at that part of the screen. NGC 1893 is another loose open cluster in Auriga. I'm hoping to get through all the studies I have in the AstroJoy Deep Sky Atlas within the bounds of Auriga, so that we can at least have a look at Messier 1 using longer-term exposures to get a sense of how this system will work on nebulous studies as well as stars. And the star views here we're getting are quite nice actually, although it looks a bit more like a star atlas in terms of how it's presented, but that may just be the way I've set it up. Here we have NGC 1907 in the usual location on the screen. As I mentioned earlier, I did not do the most precise job of a 3-star alignment. There were some difficulties with the whole process that have to do with switching equipment around so you can go from eyepiece astronomy to the imaging system itself. But anyway, we are getting our studies in the field of view, and I am using the zoom function so you can see. Let's see, there's the full rectangular view. So we're within probably 15 to 20 arc minutes in the center, and if we do the zoom, we're moving a little bit out more to the perimeter, and we're also getting a more rectangular view, which many people prefer to a perfect square. Okay, we should be seeing NGC 1931 somewhere in the screen, but I'm not. should be in the usual location. But what we're going to do now is we're going to probably increase the exposure time. Maybe it will reveal some fainter stars, which will give us a better sense of a cluster. So here's how I do it. Clicking, go over to exposure time. We'll set it up for 30 seconds. We'll initiate. That just basically tells the camera that now should expose for 30 seconds now. I'm not sure if it's going to be stacking. On the other interface that comes with the camera itself, basically it's 5 stacks. So I'm assuming we're getting 5 stacks of 6 seconds each, but I can't be sure about that. And then, so you can see down below it's saying it's shooting right now. It's gathering the data. It's preparing the data in the ASI air. The ASI air is loading it. We're circling the wagons here, showing that we're about to reveal it. And we are now vastly overexposed. So let's see how we're going to fix this. Go this way. Go this way. Well, this is very peculiar. Why are we so overexposed? I guess we have the light here. This is the histogram right here, so maybe this will help us out a little bit. Well, we're starting to reveal something now. But what I want to do is I want to get it blacked out. Whoa. All right, well, for some strange reason, we're now getting a green screen with very bright stars. So let's try a different exposure time on this now. We are clearly overexposed. This histogram here is very interesting. I basically am going to have to pay more attention to putting sliders at different locations on it. It gives you clues about what you want to do with setting things up. There is a lot of light out in the backyard, local lamp. Here we go. Now we got something. All right, go back, 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 back. I'm not seeing any additional stars here. All right, this is the kind of background sky we would expect to see. There's our, maybe a little too dark, too bright. Let's push this baby out a little bit and darken up the background sky a little bit. I don't think we've gotten any improvement, by the way, in revealing the cluster, although it's in this region here. So that's where we're going to be at with this. Now that was the last cluster. I think it was 1931. And you see in Auriga, that's on the Astro Geek Joy Deep Sky Atlas. Let's go see if we can turn up M1 at this point and get a decent reveal on it. All right. All right, we've got our view of Messier 1, the supernova remnant from a supernova that blew up in Taurus about 1054, noted by Chinese astronomers. Gives us a little darker background sky. Now, this is something I like to watch for with this. If we zoom in, you'll notice we don't really lose a lot of presence. And I think it's because we're putting more of the pixels to use. And I think the pixels are good down to about 0.5 arc seconds, whereas on the Rev 2 system to about 2. What we want to do now is we're going to increase our exposure time to 10 seconds and see what kind of a difference it makes. We're really not getting a sense of the filamentary structure of Messier 1. The Crab Nebula, and the reason why is there's just too much light in the sky. But let's see if we get any improvement in this as we do. It's loading the image now. We're operating at about a quarter of a megabyte per second transfer rates. Pretty good, actually. It looks like the image file may actually be longer or larger. We're now almost fully got it, and we're going to prepare the, oh yes, very bright. All right, very clear image here. Let's play with this a little bit, brightens the background. Bring it all the way down, darken the sky, we're starting to get a little sense of the filamentary structure in the Crab Nebula. Let's try an exposure now of 30 seconds. Hopefully we won't be overwhelmed like we were last time. And I think the reason why is somebody pulled up and parked behind the condo here, and as a result turned on motion-activated light, which spilled into the sky and complicated our view. So let's see what we get now. Shooting. Should be transferring soon. And if we're lucky, you'll be able to do an image of Messier 42, but it's going to have to climb above the roof of the condo to be able to do so. We're now loading the image at about 1/4 megabyte per second, maybe a little less. This time I'm going to stay with the image fully. We'll see the wagons be circled. Once again, we're within maybe 10 or 15 arc minutes of the center. I'm not too displeased with that. Like I said, it might have been very close to the edge in the Rev 2 system because of its smaller field of view. All right, compiling the image, and we're about to display it. Let's see if we get overwhelmed by too much. Yes, we got overwhelmed by too much luminosity. So backing out again. Come on, let me have my, oh, it's just one click. Let's go back to an exposure time of 10 seconds. That's just what we're going to have to live with, and I'll give you the final view of Messier 1, the Crab Nebula, and Taurus. Okay, we're now on to our final view of the Crab Nebula. We're seeing it slightly zoomed in. Probably not much more. We might have gone from something roughly about 40x to about 60x. That was my experience before when I was playing with it. Getting some sense of condensation in the middle of the Crab Nebula. And we are getting some speckling on the screen. Like I said, it's not a particularly good night for doing any kind of deep sky, real-time imaging, or otherwise. You certainly wouldn't want to be doing. If you were doing anything, you'd have to stack everything up, and then you'd have to get rid of all the surplus luminosity on the screen, filtering it out. So let me go ahead and see if we can get that look of Messier 42. Great. Orion. I thought I'd initialize the camera before we get the reveal. We did, for the first time, lose communication. This is our current view of Messier 1. We lost communication. I had to reinitialize my contact. The best way to actually fix a problem with communications is to just go in and switch off. Switch back onto your normal Wi-Fi LAN, and then go disconnect that and go back to the ASI air. That seems to be the best method of rapidly recovering your connection with the ASI Air app in the BlueStacks player. Now that BlueStacks stacks on top of, it's an emulator that stacks on top of Windows 11. And it gives you an entirely different interface. That's just what you got to live with. Alright, so we're still loading, if you look down at the bottom right-hand corner. Very slow baud rate right now, unfortunately, so it may take a while. I had hoped to be able to capture the big reveal of Messier 42. We have an exposure time of 10 seconds. 30 seconds is just too long. We capture too much background light and it gets overwhelmed, as you've seen in previous studies. It's taking quite a while at 25 kilobytes per second to be able to load up the image. I'm hoping it'll get through before I have to reinitialize so we can get that Carpe Noctem view of Messier 42, the Great Nebula in Orion. And its neighbor, Messier 43, if we're lucky. Anyway, I'm going to take a break from the imaging right now and allow it to continue to bring in the data. Perhaps I'll go out and reposition the antenna slightly while we're waiting. You see on BlueStacks when you get a disconnect. And yes, the antenna of the ASI Air unit is being partially obstructed by the optical tube assembly of the telescope, which explains why we're having difficulty with image transfers of Messier 42. So I'm going to go go down to the bottom here. I'm going to turn it off, disconnect it. I'm going to reconnect it. And hopefully with the screen here will say we've reestablished communications. Reconnect succeeded. Here's our full screen view. Huh, I don't get it. We're getting another view of the last study, which was, of course, Messier 1, Crab Nebula. So let's reinitialize our study. Look how pixelated it is. I'm definitely pointing the scope towards Messier 42. And it has cleared the roof of the house. I want to point out that the actual ASI area is probably some 50 feet away. We're having to broadcast a signal into the back porch, through the kitchen, down the hallway, to the, oh, we're getting a little better. We're getting, ooh, wow, look at that blood right down there. Finally into a spare bedroom, and then we're on the far wall of the spare bedroom. I would have liked for Messier 1 to actually be less pixelated than that, but that's just the way it is. At this point now, I'm hoping for any kind of image of Messier 42 to conclude our evening's efforts. So let me go ahead and bail on this until it gets ready to compile an image. Okay, it's been at least 5 minutes. We're down to the last maybe 5%, as you can see on the progress bar below. So we should be seeing the image compile. There we go. And there is our view. Highly pixelated, overexposed view of Messier 42. Let's play with it a little bit. That makes it a little brighter. We don't want that. It brings out stuff, but that makes it brighter too. Slide the slide bar down here. We're actually changing some of the color characteristics. Okay, that's all right. If we go all the way down to here, we're just basically seeing the core. What if we can see the trapezium? Nope. It's a bit too long on the exposure time. Let's just continue to develop. Now, interestingly, you could play with something like this in order to be able to bring out, by stacking different aspects of. Look at how extensive the nebulosity is now out to here, even though we're overexposed in this region. Now this nebulosity, I believe, is somewhere around 40 arc minutes in width, so I will have to verify that, but we are getting a rather large screen view here. All right, taking out, that's probably the best view from the point of view of capturing, but it's totally overexposed in this region, which aesthetically makes it a little less interesting. I could do another image capture at 1 second, but I'm not so sure that it would take quite a while to compile the image. There is one other thing I want to show you, and it's going to take me a second to set this up. The flat panel display we're having here is a little bit inexpensive, so it may be contributing to the pixelization. Give me a moment here. I'm going to flip open the other screen. So now we have the view as it is seen in the laptop screen itself. It looks a little overexposed to me on the handy cam. We're getting too much overexposure out of this region here compared to what I'm seeing on the screen. So it's my handheld camera that's overexposing it. Anyway, the pixelation isn't near, it's been reduced visibly by looking at the image and imaging it on the smaller laptop screen. And with that little comparison there, we are going to say carpe noctem. Well, as an addendum to my carpe noctem moment, I did a 5-second exposure on Messier 31, went out and washed some dishes, And here is the view you get at 5 seconds. Let's go ahead and have a closer look. Yes, indeed. You got your eagle's beak right here with its wings spread. Here's the conch shell nebula here. It's not overexposed with its bright central star. Trapezium is somewhere in there. We're getting some luminosity around the edge. Very, very decent image. I've probably gotten a similar image using the Rev 2 system after about 30 seconds of image compilation. However, the Rev 2 system barely manages to get an expanse of the core region plus maybe some of the spread wings into the field of view. So actually, I'm going to just basically frame it the way you might see it, and that looks pretty much the way it might turn up, as I recall, in the Rev 2 system right there. 5-second exposure through a 150 millimeter f4 Newtonian telescope with about 18% loss in luminosity due to a central obstruction. Not a problem with an apochromatic or semi-apochromatic refractor. However, the sky conditions here are at least 2 magnitudes poorer than they are in John Day, and that has contributed to the fact that we've had to limit the exposure time to 5 seconds to get a halfway decently presentable view. All right. Once again, carpe